All right. I'm Russ
And I'm Megan, coming at you from Waterfront Botanical Gardens
and Twisted Nature Bonsai.
in Louisville, Kentucky, and you're listening to the Bonsai Time podcast.
Bonsai on.
Welcome to the Bonsai Time podcast, the tree hugger's #1 spot for history, horticulture, and having fun. In part 1 today, we explore how Louisville's Waterfront Botanical Gardens recently sprouted from a former dump. Guests Megan Bibelhauser and Russell Stevens share insights into this history and of the local bonsai scene. Stay tuned for part 2, focused on new developments at the garden, including their bonsai weekend, May 30th to June 1st, 2025. Welcome, Megan and Russ. So, Megan, you're from I guess we'll just jump right into it. Megan, you're from the Botanical Garden in Kentucky, Louisville, Waterfront Botanical Garden. And
Yes.
then Russ, you're with Twisted Nature Bonsai, and then also with the Greater Louisville Bonsai Society, right?
That's correct.
Well, you and I met last year, but you haven't met Kevin and Kelly before. They're my co-hosts in this podcast endeavor.
Hi, guys. Nice to meet
Hi.
you.
Hey, how's it going?
So Kevin is another bonsai guy. He's from Oregon. Well, of course, everybody involved is a bonsai guy or gal. But yeah, he's from Oregon. And then we met when he moved here to Columbus. And then I moved to Columbus again. And then Kelly, we met her when she was kind of road tripping through Columbus, but she's actually practicing bonsai in SoCal area.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you guys.
Great to meet you all. Thank you.
So I thought this wasn't on the outline, but I thought we could just start off with a little small talk and like get to know you, Megan and Russ. So how did you both get into plants, and just in general, before we dive into the bonsai weekend and the botanical garden specific stories?
That is a great starter. So I just grew up being an outdoor kid. I spent a ton of time outside. I lived on a 100-acre farm in North Carolina, and that's where I spent my days. I didn't have a bunch of neighbors, didn't live in a neighborhood with other kids where we ran around and played. So I've always been a big proponent of the great outdoors, and as I've gotten older, generated more of a love of cultivating my own gardens at home. And although I would say I'm far from an expert, I am certainly an enthusiast. I'm very interested in native gardening and native landscaping. What can I do to bring in plants that are going to be beneficial for the environment in which we live and the pollinators in which we live? So that has always been very important to me. So to be able to marry that with my profession and get to promote that in a marketing and communications direction, that is a dream. So I'm just beyond thrilled to be a part of Waterfront Botanical Gardens and to be here at this stage of our growth.
So did you kind of seek out that direction with your marketing degree, or did it just kind of come up as an opportunity?
It kind of came up as an opportunity. My focus in my education was on social entrepreneurship. So I was focused very specifically on how can I work in a professional business environment that is in some way, shape, or form benefiting the world around me. And I didn't know what that looked like yet. So for a while, for about 6 years, I ran a summer camp program actually for children with a certain medical condition. And so I did spend a great deal of time outside. And when it came time to make a change in my career that was a little bit more in sync with my family and my life, I came across this opening, a director of marketing and communications at Waterfront Botanical Gardens. And I've said many times, I looked at my husband and my heart was just beating fast because I knew when I read the job description that this is the direction I want to go, and this is as ideal as it could possibly be. So yeah, it kind of fell in my lap, and I'm so happy to be here.
Well, welcome. Sounds like a good match.
Thanks.
And then what about you, Russ? How did you get into plants and then now owning your own bonsai nursery?
Quite a circuitous route. My mom's name is Rose, and she had a rose garden, so I dealt with roses as a child, but didn't really fancy those too much. So through high school, college, was more into sports, basketball, um, lots of cars, electronics, computers, that type of stuff. And then it wasn't until I was mid to late 20s, I was doing landscaping at a small landscaping company. But we were doing more accent plantings and adding specialty plants to landscapes where lots of people just have normal landscapes, but we would add, you know, Japanese maples specifically, as well as a number of other ornamentals just to complement what was already there. And that kind of got me started with Japanese maples. Became an arborist back in 2012. And then I've just kind of gravitated towards dwarf conifers and Japanese maples. And, after working with those in the landscape for many years, you would lose customers, customers would move or die. And all of your work that you've been pruning on for years would suddenly go away or not. I wouldn't have access to it anymore. So that's what the allure to bonsai was for me. But we held the BCI ABS show Bonsai on the Bluegrass here in 2011. My mentor in the Greater Louisville Bonsai Society, Lee Squires, somehow tricked me into becoming president of the society for the next few years. It was supposed to be a 2-year term, but it turned into a 5-year term. So kind of went headfirst in with that. During that period, I was studying with Ryan out in Oregon, as well as any other workshops that he had around, studying with local teachers, Owen Rich. And then when Bjorn moved a little bit closer to Louisville, started studying with him back in 2018 until he moved, last year. As far as the business component for Bonsai, it's still, I'm a plant healthcare professional. I save mature trees for my day job, root collar excavations, deep root feeding, trunk injections, those types of things are what I prefer to do. Lots of soil amendments as well. And that kind of pays for my bonsai. But as you guys probably know, once you start to collect trees, you've got to get rid of them as you get better ones. So, just opened up a small business, got some supplies coming in to help, fulfill the need that's in our local market. And, I've had very nice organic growth over the last 10 or so years, maintaining a small backyard nursery. We do have an offsite growing area to develop some of our seedlings and cuttings. We do a lot of propagation from seed and cutting, but predominantly pines and junipers. But we also offer a wide range of soils and just generally I like to teach people about the trees. So I was sick of hearing the story about everybody buying a tree and how it died a week later or 3 weeks later or whatnot, and decided that I was gonna bite the bullet and start teaching people how to grow trees. So kind of, still a small business, still generate most of my revenue, other sources, but I do offer quite a few supplies, trees, pre-bonsai, as well as regular trees for sale at the nursery.
Nice. I bet that you have a more, maybe different level of experience, kind of different type of experience coming from the arborist world. I'm surprised we don't have more arborists that turn into bonsai people.
Yeah, there are quite a few, but a lot of arborists. So, as a certified arborist, yes, I can cut trees, but most of the stuff that I do is soil amendments and root work, trying to aerate our soils down here that are pretty clay-like in Kentucky. So, the I mean, it takes kind of a weird person for bonsai. There's not.
It's true.
Okay,
Yep.
good. I mean, let's say that being a weird person.
Mhm.
But so it takes a different kind of person. So it doesn't necessarily have to be anybody in particular or what they're interested in gardening or arboriculture wise, but just the artistic component that is the draw for a lot of people.
Well, very cool. And speaking of soil, does the botanical garden have any special considerations with their soil? So now we can kind of get into how the botanical garden was founded. I understood from my last visit that the Louisville Waterfront Botanical Garden is founded on a former landfill. Is that right?
You got it. Yes. So the short answer is absolutely. There are a lot of considerations for the soil here. It is a really unique challenge, but the backstory there, the site where the gardens is located in the 1800s and early 1900s, it was a residential area, but we are just off of the Ohio River, and unfortunately, this area is very prone to flooding. And we saw that just last week, actually, a record high flood here in the city. So in 1937, a really, really massive, historic flood wiped out the residential area that was here. It destroyed the homes, destroyed the neighborhood. And so at that point, the area really just became a dump. And it was an unofficial dump for a while, and then it officially became a dump. And so the Ohio Street dump specifically. And that sat here for a long time. So from the 1930s up until 1973, I believe. What changed the trajectory of this space is the interstate, I-71 runs on the other side of the gardens, and that was completed in 1969. And the dump, folks would come over here and dump their hot ash and their coals, and so the dump would catch fire and it would smolder. And the fire department was up here constantly putting out fires. And so then I-71 is completed, and you're driving into downtown Louisville and you're passing this smoldering dump. And so lovingly, not lovingly, it was considered here's the gateway to Louisville, is this smoldering dump. And so the city decided we don't want that. We need to shut down the Ohio Street dump. That took place in 1969, and by 1973, I'm sorry, 1969, I-71 was completed. By 1973, they officially shut down the dump. And so it sat, there was a process to close it down officially per EPA regulations, environmental regulations. And so that was a multi-step process, which required about 25 feet of fill dirt, some additional soil on top of that, planting of just some real basic grasses, and then it was left. And it sat here, and it sat here, and it sat here. And meanwhile, there's a organization in town called Botanica, and they were plant enthusiasts, gardening enthusiasts, and one of their members passed away and left a very large bequest to build a botanical garden and conservatory in Louisville. And so those dollars could only be used for that purpose. And it was a significant gift. And the members of Botanica set out to make that a reality. And so it took quite a while to raise additional funding, to also find the site. This location was selected in 2009. The land was owned by the city of Louisville. And so the site was selected in 2009. Obviously, a lot of additional work had to go into actually acquiring the property. And officially in 2017, we were able to purchase it. We purchased this land for $1 from the city of Louisville. We lovingly say that we took a big liability off the books there for the city and took that on ourselves for that $1. So yes, the soil was not hospitable whatsoever in the early years. You would not dig in and find worms or bugs or any other insects. It was pretty harsh environment for any kind of critters. So now when we see a pill bug or a roly-poly or a centipede that's made its way indoors into our venue spaces, instead of, getting frustrated and saying, why are all these bugs making their way inside? We actually kind of celebrate because they have found life in the soil here thanks to our really dedicated horticulture team that applies various soil amendments. We have a gentleman that we share some space with on the back of our parking lot that does some composting, and he's experimenting with different forms of compost, and we reap some of that reward because we are able to apply some of his compost to our landscapes, and they can track how are the plants producing and how are the plants performing in those areas of the gardens compared to other areas where we're not using his specific formula of compost. So there's a lot happening, but the horticulture team has their work cut out for them, but they have also done a tremendous job in making this a very hospitable place. Actually, as we're sitting here now in one of the spaces at the gardens, there's a groundhog that's out the window that is running around. So we've found all kinds of wildlife that now call this home despite the conditions of the space not that long ago.
It's amazing. Yeah, yeah. Wow. I was gonna think of something in the relation of like, you all have the Bourbon Trail around there. I'm just like, did the fires with the smoldering ash, was that the start of the Bourbon Trail for the smoky essence of the flavor? I
Right.
was like,
I
I
think
don't
it was
know.
the smoky essence was probably a little different than
Right, right,
that of
right.
bourbon.
It's funny as plant people as we are, or plant adjacent people. Ryan's teacher, Dan Robinson, actually built his wonderful bonsai museum nursery on a landfill as well in Seattle, Washington, or right outside Seattle. And it's interesting to think about these things being utilized that way. And then, as yourself, you just stated, you're creating this new ecosystem again to what was once there. That's an amazing feat, but also very time consuming. Yeah, it's just interesting because also you were discussing, soils and things in that way. That's just how do they find the site? I mean, how do they come across like we should build it there? Why not somewhere else?
That is a great question, actually. I don't know the details on the various sites that maybe they were considering. This would have been back in the 1990s into early 2000s. So it's been a while since that process was underway. But I think that, the acreage that we have here, it's 23 acres. And
Nice.
geographically, where we're situated within the city is important. So we're right along what we consider a tourism corridor. There's River Road that flows into a really popular area called Nulu, which is just on the outskirts of downtown. Then you've got downtown, and our bridges connect us over the Ohio River into southern Indiana. And so we really are in a great spot. As far as access, we have the interstate here. We're in a really wonderful and vibrant neighborhood called Butchertown, which has its own really interesting history. So I think they probably considered a lot of those factors. But also, what a phenomenal story to be able to tell that
Right.
look what humans did to destroy this area. And now we can take that and we can turn it into something absolutely beautiful and magical, and a place that we can actually enjoy as a community and for our guests that are in from out of town.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because it's just I just graduated with my bachelor's in horticulture, and we talked about conservation and re-implementing ecosystems and things in that way at the Ohio State University, and now doing a professional work or landscaping, like we talked about earlier and things. It's yeah, that's an amazing story, and thank you for sharing the background. Yeah, because Ryan and I and Kelly were like, we read a little bit about it, but how did we come across the whole thing?
Right. Yeah. Well, and there's a little bit of, as we're talking about the time and energy it takes to create this, considering what it used to be, there's a lot of parallels there with bonsai, right? You're in this for the long haul. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. And you have to have the passion and the dedication and the vision to see what it can be in the future, even if it is not right now. So I love that parallel there with the art of bonsai. And I am here on the periphery of bonsai. I get to see what Russ and the other members of the Greater Louisville Bonsai Society are doing, and what the horticulture team here is hoping to accomplish here in the next couple of years. And I'm amazed by it. I've learned a lot by it. I'm now pronouncing it correctly.
Very good, very good.
A big deal. Yeah. Yeah. Anywhere I go, bonsai.
They also run into the issue too, where people are just like, "What?" So you just say
Oh yeah.
bonsai.
Then
Like,
you have
oh
to say
yeah,
it
I
wrong.
know that.
Right.
Yeah. So it sounds like, given that unique location that you guys have acquired and built your garden on, does that feed into the mission of the garden at all? Like, has there been an emphasis on, say, educating the public about rejuvenating soil, or like rehabilitating these types of places from the gardens? Like you said, you're doing that work, but is work also going into that too?
Yes, very much so. So everything that we do is centered on education and environment. We had field trips on site today. So we bring kids up here to teach them about what we're doing at the gardens, and for them to come in and get their hands dirty and have that exposure to nature and to gardening. And my daughter, I have a 5-year-old. We hosted a spring break camp. And she was up here, and I got to watch her and the other 20 kids releasing worms into the soil, and they got to follow their worms around in the soil. They're getting this really up close and personal experience.
How do they follow the worms? Like, is there a little tracker on them or something?
No, we've got raised beds in our learning garden that is specifically for the use of these kids to get in and get their hands dirty. While I love that they have the opportunity there, I think our horticulture team, might be a little stressed out if we said, okay, we're going to release the children into these other cultivated parts of the garden. So they've got their own dedicated space where they can go and they can get messy and dirty, and it's perfectly fine for them to dig through the dirt. They were digging little wormholes with their fingers. But yes, we are constantly telling the story of what used to be here and showing anyone that visits, children or otherwise, but we like to start as young as we can to give that education on conservation and the environment, and how we as humans can have a positive impact, knowing that we are also having a negative impact. What can we do to try and flip the script a little bit and bring something positive back to the area?
Nice. It's a very noble goal. I was wondering, have you tied in your efforts, like educating the public about native plants and things like that, with any other movements, like what do they call it? Like the backyard, like homegrown national park or something like that?
Mm-hmm. We haven't done anything formally. There are a few things that we have done just as a team here. For example, like tagging monarch butterflies. That's not something that we are formally doing as an organization, but when the opportunity arises, one of our colleagues is really interested in being able to do tagging the monarchs and being able to track the monarchs as a part of the larger effort to see where they're going and follow their migration patterns. And so we are able to witness that. And when we have the opportunity, we share that with guests as well, but nothing I would say on a larger scale. But we are very active with our local organizations, trying to increase tree canopy here in the city, in this urban environment, heat island environment. So Trees Louisville is a great partner of ours, and they're really focused on, how can we bring more green spaces to the area. We do have a really lovely park system here as well, the Olmsted Parks. So we try and work closely with those other partners to make sure that we are collaborating and that we're providing this resource really to our community.
We'll be right back. This episode is sponsored by the Waterfront Botanical Garden's 3rd annual Bonsai Weekend in Louisville, Kentucky. Details at bonsaiweekend.com. Come visit Kentucky's newest botanic garden and see what's growing with the Greater Louisville Bonsai Society. The show will feature guest judge Owen Reich, bonsai workshops, demonstrations, cultural activities, food and drink, koi fish on display from the Louisville Koi Society, and an expanded selection of vendors for all your bonsai needs. I'll be there too, and I hope to see you there on May 30th to June 1st. Tickets are now on sale at bonsaiweekend.com. Now back to the show. And then I have one more question for you and Russ kind of on this topic. So the garden is very focused on educating the public on the broadness of how plants can be helpful and what's going on in our environment. And you guys started collaborating with the Bonsai Society also, right? So has the Bonsai Society collaborated on any of those efforts so far?
Well, Russ.
Or
Yeah,
maybe any
or as far as
of
like the soil remediation efforts, not so much the Bonsai Society. I've worked with the head of horticulture, Andrew Haggerty, with a number of soil remediation tactics, as well as just like initial inoculation of the soil, bringing it on site, as well as soil building, where in some spots they have less than 6 inches of soil. So, very serious soil considerations in that regard. But, as far as bonsai education with the gardens, we've offered a couple of workshops, namely through the Bonsai Weekend last year. But we will offer a couple different workshops throughout the season, but it's more bonsai focused than any kind of regenerative ag focus
Gotcha.
as much as I would like that, but
Yeah.
right.
Have you thought at all, Russ, about how like your large scale tree work, like your trees in the field, does that impact how you're field growing trees for bonsai? Like any different soil techniques you're adapting for that?
Well, for sure. Our soil is very similar chemically to Akadama, but their soil is much more airy, a lot more airspace. So we incorporate a lot of pine fines or soil conditioner into our backfill, as well as a tiny bit of peat and other, like different mycorrhiza and beneficial bacteria. So, when we're planting in the field and in the containers, we'll definitely inoculate the soil in that regard.
Okay, gotcha. And then you mentioned the bonsai weekend. What other major events are going on at the garden throughout the year that people
Yeah.
might want to visit?
So we are getting ready next Tuesday to have our Fascinator Affair. And that is, we are in Kentucky and the Kentucky Derby is right around the corner. And so like any good Louisville venue, we have a Derby season event. And so our fourth annual Fascinator Affair is something that happens annually. It is a luncheon, fashion show, fundraiser. It is very fun. So we get folks up here to the gardens dressed in their Derby best, and they're able to shop with local artists that are displaying their fascinators, their hats, their bow ties, their pocket squares on volunteer models that circulate the room during this very spring luncheon. So it's a really lovely, very festive, very Derby season, very Kentucky event that happens every year. Bonsai Weekend's coming up at the end of May, which I know we'll talk about a little bit in a little while. It'll be our third year for the Bonsai Weekend. We also have our free family festival, Kaleidoscope Family Festival. And we call it Kaleidoscope because we have these really fantastic large kaleidoscopes in the gardens that you can look through, and you can point them in different directions and see different color variations. And we decided, why don't we theme this family-friendly free event after the kaleidoscopes? And it's all about looking at the world through the lens of plants. What are we interacting with in our daily lives that maybe we don't consider originate with plants? And so we bring in a lot of community partners and even retail experiences here on site that day. And that will be in August this year. to show people in an interactive way, in an educational way, how their product originated from a plant. And we're not just talking food, we're talking housewares, and we're talking, obviously the obvious food and beverage and herbs and spices and the teas, but we definitely get some housewares, and we have some wood turners, and it's a really fun. We actually had someone a couple of years ago brought out, they were performing musically, but they would connect electrodes to different plants and kind of produce these sounds with the plants and mix them together in such a way that you're listening to the music of plants. And that was really amazing. So Kaleidoscope Family Festival is a really fun one in August. Last year, for the first time, which we're continuing this year, we instituted a silent disco, which is called Party at the Gardens, very appropriately. We line that up immediately before our holiday light experience. And so I'll talk about that for a moment and then come back to Party at the Gardens. The holiday light experience, we kick off on Black Friday, November 29th, and we run select nights through December 30th. We light the entire gardens up with holiday lights. We have Santa here, we have Mrs. Claus, we have crafts, we have our Jingle All the Way Cafe food truck that has hot drinks and sweet treats, and feeling a little naughty for the adults, you can get it spiked if you want. It's a self-guided experience through the gardens. Really great holiday tradition. So then back to Party at the Gardens, we bump that up right before Gardens of Glimmer begins. And so the gardens are mostly lit in these holiday lights. And then you tack on the silent disco, and your headphones are gleaming, and you can walk the gardens while listening to your music and doing your silent disco thing. It's so much fun. It is one of the best events that we've had. So yeah, we always have a lot of things going on, but those are really our main signature events, and we try and keep those running cyclically throughout the year. So always something to look forward to.
Yeah, they sound
Have
like.
you all ever?
Oh, go
I was
ahead.
going to ask real quick. Have you all ever incorporated the plant music that you created with that artist? Maybe like an EDM thing. Maybe make an
I'd
album
listen
and
to that.
I know it was such a great idea. I would actually love to have them back at our event this year, and if we can make that happen, then yeah, that's a great suggestion. We might try and collaborate, and maybe we'll have something to release in the future.
Put it
Like a
on
mixtape.
SoundCloud, put it on Spotify.
We could do the music of Bonsai.
Yeah.
There you go. There you
Yeah, it's definitely EDM. Yes, I'm serious, but yeah.
go.
So I was just wondering, whose idea was it to do the silent disco at the garden, or like where did that come from? Because that seems kind of like a random marriage, but it sounds like a very unique event.
Yeah. So we have a fundraising committee, and we've tried various forms of your kind of traditional, we are a nonprofit organization, so we've tried various forms of your traditional nonprofit gala. And as wonderful as those are, you can kind of rinse and repeat and do that over and over again, and you're going to see it at other organizations. And we wanted to try something that was different and would really set us a bit apart and be fun. We want those that are supporting the gardens to come here and have a great time while they're doing it. And so, yeah, the fundraising committee joined together and said, what about a silent disco? I think one of them had gone to a silent disco and said, this could be a fun new direction. And, I'd actually pitched just before that. I said, why don't we do a Halloween silent disco? And it's the botanical silent disco. And so they said, well, wait, we were also talking about doing a silent disco for this party in November. So I relinquished the idea. We'll do something else botanical. It won't be a silent disco. But yeah, no, we like to brainstorm. We're a creative crew here.
Russ, you got to get in there and get your Twisted Nature silent disco going on.
Maybe the Twisted Nature would be good for the Halloween one.
Yeah, there you go. Actually, Twisted Nature, that could make an album name for this.
Copyright it now.
Yeah.
Right.
So then, oh, sorry, Russ.
I'll just
What did you
click.
say, Russ?
Right.
Oh, yes. Okay. So we've talked about a lot of your other events, but let's circle back to the Bonsai weekend. So how did that collaboration with the club start, the Bonsai Club, and then how has this event evolved for you both?
You want to start?
We can talk about the collaboration.
Yeah, so we had a very prominent member of our club pass away. Actually, he got dementia, didn't pass away, but he had 35 trees that were originally from, Brussels, some of the original tree that Brussels brought in, back in the late 80s, early 90s, before import regulations got really strict. So we had, some super nice trees. There was not really a place to put them. But through my mentor, Lee Squires, he was good friends with the gentleman that had the collection, Tom McCurry. And Lee was able to work with the executive director of the gardens at that time and sucker them into becoming the owners of these 35 or so beautiful bonsai. Um, so once the gardens had acquired them, they had no clue what to do with them. So they reached out to us, and our kind of relationship first formed back in 2020. As soon as the pandemic was getting off the ground. But we had received these trees. This gentleman hadn't maintained them in a number of seasons. So they all needed to be either nursed back to health and or repotted. So the club, that was our first kind of event with the gardens then back in 2020. And then took us 2 years of convincing them to let us host the show here because and the show in the past we hosted our show at a venue not nearly as nice as, I mean, not even on the radar as where we have it now in the Grazer Center. Um, we were able to convince them to let us hold the show. We had more people in the gardens in a single day than I'd ever seen. And then, they asked us to do it again last year, and we had another great turnout. It was far more people than I had anticipated. But we had over 1,700 people show up. 1,700 paying guests, which was very nice since last year was the first time we decided to institute a small fee. But it all for what we provide, to the gardens, it's a very small. What the club provides to the garden, it's a very small fee just to see the best some of the best trees in our region. We display a couple of the trees from the gardens, and then we also have trees from Tennessee, all over Kentucky, a couple trees occasionally from Ohio, Indiana, and St. Louis. So we've got a good following. It's become, we're still definitely a very young show and growing, but we're, evolving into more of a regional component, stepping up our display quality. Got lots of good new things in store. I don't really want to release before everybody shows up, but we've been working hard in the off season to make this show more in line with some of the top tier shows in the nation. We definitely have, visited the Pacific Bonsai Expo for the first time last year. Been to the Nationals 3 different times. Went to the Artisans Cup back in 2015 in Portland. So I've seen a number of shows. Not that we're trying to get to Artisans Cup level. Nestle somewhere in between PBE and Artisans Cup. As far as we've got the great facility, we're still working on some of our trees, obviously, but the venue works well. We've got a great number of trees that we've already collected and still acquiring more.
Yeah, so
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, just as Russ mentioned, the first year we did this, we said, let's just make this a free event. We'll see what happens. And we didn't even want to call it a show. We just called it the Spring Bonsai Weekend. And it was a Saturday and a Sunday. And I wasn't scheduled to work that weekend. I was going to come in just to check it out so I could see how it went off. And I came in the last hour of being open on Sunday that year in 2023, and our parking lot holds about 200 vehicles. And I had to park all the way at the back of the lot, and I'd never seen it that full. And that was the last hour of the event. So moving forward, we said, wow, if it's going to be this successful, we absolutely need to formalize this as a recurring event and step up our game in all the ways that Russ described. And so now it is a ticketed event. So we can actually track attendance. We know last year we had folks from over 18 states that traveled to visit the show, which it blows us away. We know how much time and energy we're putting into it, but to see it pay off and to see the interest and the enthusiasm from folks that don't even know much about bonsai, but they are so intrigued and inspired by the concept that they can appreciate it without knowing the nitty-gritty details. So yeah, it's just been amazing, and we're really excited for this year.
So
That's
this
really cool.
leads me into a different line of thought. So even if your very first show that you didn't even call a show had that much attention, I guess, Megan, you're probably very good at your marketing job. How did you spread the word to get it to be that popular that it even blew away your expectations?
Yeah, I've laughed every time that question comes up. I love to say, "Oh yeah, absolutely, that was all me." But it was kind of magical how it panned out. It was so very grassroots. I went online and I found the directories of bonsai clubs across the country, and I literally started sending out emails to clubs, inviting them, sharing information, save the date. This is coming up. We certainly did press releases. We tried to keep it as regional as possible. So instead of just focusing here on Louisville, let's talk to Cincinnati, let's talk to Indianapolis, let's talk to Nashville. What are the other kind of larger cities within a couple hours from here that maybe someone might travel? Now, I will say we got a lot of guidance from the Bonsai Society, because they know the people that are interested in bonsai, and they know that they'll travel for an opportunity to see trees. And I wouldn't have known that. So it's very collaborative. I'm very reliant on their expertise to tell me, hey, who do I need to be talking to? What are the opportunities in the bonsai world? We definitely got some local media to come out and do interviews with us on site, which is always a fun time. And I can get the bonsai guys, as I lovingly refer to them, the bonsai guys, to come up and be on camera for a little while I'm off to the side and giving thumbs up or whatever kind of support that they might need. We obviously the traditional tactics of social media marketing and email marketing, and we are just thrilled at how well it's been received. So obviously we're stepping things up at this point. Okay, let's talk to the guys on Bonsai Time. Let's is a great opportunity to share the word and spread it a bit more nationwide. So yeah, it's been a really fun and surprising and rewarding experience on the marketing side.
I'll also say too, it's going to be worldwide. Not
Yeah.
to tout about us, but we have a worldwide audience, which is so funny to all of us because we're just doing this as a hobby. But yeah, we were very excited to hear that you reached out to us and was like, "Oh wow, this is great." If we can support, because that's what we've been trying to do from day one, is just create this appreciation in the community outreach. And we're just weird people that like plants. And, it's one of those things. My whole question is about this bonsai related event and things. I want to circle back real quick. A little history, I guess, for you both. When was your first time you actually saw a bonsai, Megan and Russ?
Actually, so I grew up in North Carolina. I mentioned that, and it was a very rural area. My mom worked as a freelance writer for a Belgian company that had a location there in this really rural town, and she befriended a Belgian couple that moved from Belgium to this tiny itty bitty town in North Carolina. And the husband, his name's Eddie Lauer, he became a bonsai enthusiast. And so when I was in elementary school, I remember being in their basement during one of the hurricanes that was hitting North Carolina, and we were sheltering there. And I was so scared that I was going to knock over one of his bonsai trees in his basement as a elementary age child, knowing how much time he spent on them. And, I've gone back over the years and I've visited them, and his collection is vast, and he's got these pedestals all out in his backyard. So I actually, shockingly enough, living in this itty bitty rural town in North Carolina, was introduced to bonsai very young by this gentleman who continues to be a major bonsai enthusiast and professional.
Yes,
We'll have to look
nice.
him up. Sounds like
I
typical
want him to
bonsai
come
guy.
here. I want him to come
Yeah.
and visit Louisville and see what's happening here.
Yeah, I was exposed to bonsai at a much later stage in life. It was probably when I was 26 or 27. I was at up in Indianapolis, and the club was doing their show at the zoo park that's up at the zoo botanical gardens at White River, I think. But yeah, so they were just doing a little show, and I got a little shimpaku for $50, and I was already into Japanese maples and all that at that time, but just hadn't really ever looked or thought about bonsai. So, it was probably about 20 years, less than 20 years ago.
Always those funny things where we circle back, and it's just like Megan, like you were saying, you saw it when you were a kid. I did too. And Russ, you're saying you didn't get into it till your mid to late 20s, and that was me as well. And all of us find our ways, but the fact that you're pushing it so hard now with your community outreach and things, it's amazing to see. 'Cause that's the next step I think we all need to go to as a community and as community organizations, because we need to have more appreciators as a and also people that practice. But without the economy of people appreciating it and coming to these events, we don't really have a foundation to stand on. It's I say thank you for doing it.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you too, because I know it's important for botanical gardens to support bonsai, even though it's a small part of someone's garden. It makes a huge difference to the bonsai community. Even though, like, I'm not in Kentucky, I really appreciate it. I mean, I might make my way out there one day.
You do. It might be for some botanical gardens a small part of the larger picture. For us, in the era that we are in right now at Waterfront Botanical Gardens, it's a really big deal to us.
The Bonsai Time podcast has been produced by Kevin Ferris, Ryan Houston, and Kelly Louie. Find more information, relevant pictures, and links for each episode in the episode description and in our show notes at www.bonsaitimepodcast.com. To support us in creating more episodes, please remember to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. To go the extra mile, reach out if you'd like to consider sponsoring an episode. To submit questions for future Bonsai Brainstorm episodes or any other suggestions or feedback, reach out to us on social media, through our website, or at bonsaitimepodcast@gmail.com. We are Bonsai Time Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and all podcast apps, and at Bonsai Time Pod on TikTok. Lastly, find your host at the links in the description or on Instagram at Kevin_Ferris Bonsai, Bonsai with Kelly, and Ryan is at InVivo Bonsai everywhere, or www.invivobonsai.com. Thanks for listening.